Welcome back to Stab the Dragon Productions for episode number 114 and book review number 12. Have you ever approached a holiday and asked yourself, when and where did this holiday begin? Or maybe, what does this holiday actually mean? Why do we have this particular holiday and why is it at this date? The holiday I'm talking about right now is Memorial Day here in America, and this is the last weekend of May. So, by act of Congress, Memorial Day is the last Monday of the month of May. So, here it is, May of 2023, and we're going to do a book review number 12 of this book, The Genesis of the Memorial Day Holiday in America, by Daniel Bellware and Richard Gardiner, PhD. Holidays tell a lot about a nation's values and history, its religion and politics. Oops, there I go again, mixing religion and politics. But that mixture, you see, goes back to the ancients. It's who we are as human beings. In America, we seem to no longer stress the actual meaning of holidays anymore. We use them for commercial enterprises, sporting events, and a shortened work week, changing the dates of important holidays to accommodate the unions. So the actual meaning sometimes gets lost. Uh, there's nothing wrong with going to the lake or grilling out or going to a baseball game, uh, having a day off for a holiday. There's nothing wrong with any of that. The thing that's wrong is losing the meaning of the holiday, not understanding it. It's harmful to our culture. It robs our children of their heritage as Americans, and it impoverishes our soul as a nation. The holiday this weekend in America is Memorial Day. It's an annual thing. The original date was in late April in the South, where the holiday originated, but it was later changed to May. And the reason it's in the spring is to emphasize spring flowers. It was originally called Decoration Day by the Confederates at the end of the Civil War, and they would decorate the graves of their fallen with spring flowers. And in the South, April is got plenty of flowers. In the North, it's May. And so, that original Decoration Day and Memorial Day were used interchangeably as they talked about this holiday. So it started in the South, and then it was picked up by the North, and eventually became a federal holiday. But the Southern ladies wanted to bring flowers and decorate the graves of their fallen husbands, their sons and brothers, their fathers, their neighbors. It's a solemn holiday. It's not something where you're going to have a lot of celebration. You're going to have fireworks. You're not going to have parades. You're going to have memorial services in cemeteries is what you're going to have. So to participate in this holiday, I'm offering this book review of the genesis of the Memorial Day holiday in America. Last year for Memorial Day, I did mention this and I held it up and showed it. I read parts of it. But today I'm going to do an actual review of this book. And it's published by Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia, which happens to be my wife's hometown. It's where we met. I was stationed at Fort Benning a long time ago. Now it's Fort Moore. So I read this book a year ago for Memorial Day last year, but I didn't do a full review. So now I'm doing a full review, and it's simply outstanding. So the first question I want to answer and present to you is, who should read this book and why? Well, first of all, if you're a patriotic, wide awake, which is the opposite of woke, American, the term wide awake goes back to the 1850s, before the Civil War, right? It was a movement, cultural movement, some politics involved, but mainly cultural, of people just spontaneously saying, hey, we need to wake up because we're headed for a war, right? So that's where the term wide awake came from. It's for wide awake Americans who love your country, love your history. This book is going to explain what Memorial Day is all about, tell you how it originated, and all the controversies surrounding its origins. It is just a fantastic history book of this holiday. Secondly, if you're a parent or a grandparent of school-aged children and you're tired of all the Marxist woke stuff being crammed down our throats at the public schools, uh, what they're teaching these days, or maybe you're a homeschooling parent and or maybe you're just simply trying to detox and deprogram your kids from the Howard Zinn and the 1619 project stuff and that approach to history. Then, if that's you, read this book and teach your children about Memorial Day. Take them to a local Memorial Day service at the cemetery near you, as I did with my kids 25, 30 years ago. If you are if you are a high school student and you're thinking about going to college and majoring in history, or if you're currently a history student at university, this book is an example of how to do history well. This book shows you how to ask questions, critique sources, do research, and weigh the evidence. This book is probably the single best history book I've ever read in regards to how to do history. If you're a Civil War buff, I think you'll find this book fascinating. It will take you to the post-war years, and you'll see some things about the occupation of the South that you may have never heard of before. This book shows some of the positive reaching out by both sides to heal the wounds of war. And that was encouraging. It was quite remarkable. If you are a Gold Star survivor, Memorial Day is already a special day for you. It can be a tough day. But this book, I think, will enrich your life. Maybe you would describe yourself as woke. Maybe you look at the political spectrum and you say, I know I'm left of center. And perhaps you love the sight of statues of Confederate generals being torn down. Read this book. See if it changes your perspective just a little bit. Seventh, are you an elected official at any level in our body politic? A school board member in particular. State representative? Sure. Local mayor? Absolutely. A judge? Definitely. U.S. senator? President? Yeah. This book will give you some much needed background to one of America's greatest holidays. This book is supplemental reading to Civics 101. And that's actually an idea if you're a college professor too. I mean, if you are teaching civics, the American political process, this would be a good supplemental book. Or if you're doing history of the Civil War, this book again would be a great resource. Now, what is the main idea of this book? What are their key points that make this book so good? First of all, the story of how this book came to be is simply fascinating. So Daniel Bellware is a private citizen amateur historian. Richard Gardiner is a PhD and he's a professor at Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia. And Bellware had a love for history, for local history, his hometown, the South. And he started researching Memorial Day because he knew of its roots in the South. And he thought, in Columbus itself is where it started. So he did all this basic research and then he brought his findings to Dr. Gardiner. I'm going to read from the foreword to this book. And this is published in 2014. He writes, 5 years ago, I came to Columbus, Georgia to teach at Columbus State. Upon my arrival, I discovered a great wealth of history here. I met Daniel Bellware, who was working extensively on a project regarding the birth of the Memorial Day holiday. When Dan told me that Columbus was the holiday's birthplace, I suspected he was overreaching the evidence as a local booster and an amateur, so I was dismissive. Now that's amazing that a college professor admits that. That impressed me right from the get-go. He continues, but as Dan graciously shared with me his research and evidence, I began to follow up to see how he might be embellishing, twisting, or skewing the evidence. Again, amazing honesty here. I discovered not only that was he extremely careful with his claims, but also that much more evidence existed confirming his thesis. Since that time, we've worked together to put together a history that we are confident can stand scholarly and academic scrutiny by the most rigorous skeptics. When Professor John Bowles, editor of the prestigious Journal of Southern History at Rice University, reviewed our study, he concluded, "I completely agree with the conclusions of your manuscript. Your research is impressive and you convincingly show that the practice began in Georgia." Princeton historian James McPherson. I've read James McPherson's great book, Battle Cry Freedom. Amazing. He gave us the following assessment. Your article is an important contribution to the scholarship on the origins of Memorial Day. So, that's how the book begins with the foreword, and that sets the tone for the book. I mean, there's a humility here. This is not the lost cause revisited. That this is some honest local historians doing serious work. So, that's impressive. The main idea here is that the authors take on the uncertainties of the origin of Memorial Day and all the official proclamations that got it wrong, and then they clearly, convincingly, definitively prove that the day originated in Columbus, Georgia in 1866. The authors trace down the other claims for starting this holiday and detail how those claims are false. The evidence they amass is astounding. There are 437 footnotes in just 186 pages. Now, here's a little technical note, a couple of technical notes. 186 pages. This is a fairly brief book. Large print, okay, I don't know if you can see that. This is not tiny print. And it's got lots of pictures, okay? There are lots of pictures throughout. So this is not an overwhelming read. This is doable, okay? I read it in 3 days, but I'm a fanatic, so there you go. But the other technical thing I want to mention is that 437 footnotes and 186 pages, that's a lot of research. That's impressive. And the fact that they use footnotes here, notice the footnotes at the bottom, instead of endnotes, I deeply appreciate that. I'm old school. I like footnotes instead of endnotes. It is much more easy for me to read the footnotes, which I like doing. See the footnotes there. I mean, technically there's nothing wrong with endnotes, but the way some people do endnotes today is just abysmal. This is old school. I like that. So again, I'm impressed with everything they did here in the book. Now, the authors here, one of the things they do is they detail United States Congress Concurrent Resolution 587 from the year 1966, signed by President Lyndon Johnson, that states, Waterloo, New York is the birthplace of Memorial Day. And the authors write on page 11, the problem with the resolution is that no historical research accompanied it. Whoa, that's hilarious. And that's your government right there. Now, granted, that was 60 years ago or so. But still, that's how the government operates. Oh, let's do this and not research it, obviously. So I love the fact that they researched even the U.S. government and the government's position on Memorial Day. And they show how, that was a fail. The authors show that the holiday did not originate with Union General John Logan. And see, that's one of the current stories, is that John Logan, who was the head of the veterans group, Grand Army of the Republic, there's a lot of people that think he started it, okay? No. Logan was one of the guys who from the Federals who captured Atlanta. So he ends up the war in Georgia, and so he knew some Southerners. He knew people down there. He was in communication with them after the war, and basically what Logan did is he got informed by somebody from Georgia about this memorial service that they were doing. And then he took that and publicized it in 1868 and got it adopted. So Logan was important for getting the whole country to follow this, but he admits, and these authors, they have the receipts, they show uh, the process that Logan went through being contacted by somebody from the South, and then he took that and ran with it. So, and he doesn't, Logan didn't claim, oh, look what I've created. No, I mean, there's a paperwork trail there. It just got lost through the years. So, but he clearly got the idea from his time in Georgia, and the authors show that. So, I'm going to read, even though I read this last year on my Memorial Day show last year, I want to read this again. This is the letter that Mrs. Charles J. Williams sent to the editors of the newspapers in Columbus, Georgia. Uh, so I'm going to read this letter, and it's from, what's the name of the group? The Ladies Memorial Association of Columbus, Georgia, right? So this lady from that group, they had discussed it in their group, and then they forwarded this letter to both newspapers there in Columbus, Georgia. So this is the Columbus Daily Sun and the Columbus Inquirer, I think is what it was. So here's the letter dated March 10, 1866, but it was published on March 11th, I think. Editors, the ladies are now and have been for several days engaged in the sad but pleasant duty of ornamenting and improving that portion of the city cemetery sacred to the memory of our gallant Confederate dead. But we feel it unfinished work unless a day be set apart annually for its especial attention. We cannot raise monumental shafts and inscribe thereon their many deeds of heroism, but we can keep alive the memory of the debt we owe them by dedicating at least one day in each year to embellishing their humble graves with flowers. Therefore, we beg the assistance of the press and the ladies throughout the South to aid us in our effort to set apart a certain day to be observed from the Potomac to the Rio Grande and be handed down through time as a religious custom of the country to wreath the graves of our martyred dead with flowers. We would propose a day of April, as at that time our land may be truly called the land of flowers. Let every city, town, and village join in the pleasant duty. Let all be alike remembered, from the heroes of Manassas to those who expired amid the death throes of our hallowed cause. We'll crown alike the honored resting places of the immortal Jackson in Virginia, Johnson of Shiloh in Cleburne in Tennessee, and the host of gallant privates who adorned our ranks. All did their duty, and to all we owe our gratitude. Let the soldier's grave, for that day at least, be the southern Mecca to whose shrine her sorrowing women, like pilgrims, may annually bring their grateful hearts and floral offerings. And when we remember the thousands who are buried with their martial cloaks around them, without Christian ceremony of interment for their beloved bodies, we would invoke the aid of the most thrilling eloquence throughout the land to inaugurate this custom by delivering on the appointed day this year a eulogy on the unburied dead of our glorious Southern Army. They died for their country. Whether their country had or had not the right to demand the sacrifice is no longer a question of discussion with us. We leave that for future nation to decide. That it was demanded, that they nobly responded, and fell holy sacrifices upon their country's altar, and are thereby entitled to their country's gratitude, none will deny. The proud banner under which they rallied in defense of the noblest cause for which heroes fought, or trusting women prayed, has been furled forever. The country for which they suffered and died has now no name or place among the nations of the earth. Legislative enactment may not now be made to do honor to their memories, but the veriest radical that ever traced his genealogy back to the deck of the Mayflower could not deny us the simple privilege of paying honor to those who died defending the life, honor, and happiness of Southern women. What eloquence. In conclusion, If you want to know more about the history of our nation and Memorial Day holiday, read this book. If you want an example of how to do history, read this book. So now I'm going to close with a poem that this book mentions and quotes from, because this poem spread the word throughout the newspapers of the North about this memorial, and that led to it being adopted in the North. So the author of the poem is Francis Miles Finch. He lived 1827 to 1907, and I think he was a New Yorker. And this poem was initially published in the New York Tribune. Or no, it's the New York Tribune where he got the idea for the poem. And here's what the New York Tribune mentions. The women of Columbus, Mississippi. Okay, now see, that's where Columbus, Mississippi comes in, is that they actually conducted their service one day before Columbus, Georgia did, because of a typographical error by a newspaper that said to do it on April 25th instead of April 26th. So that's where Columbus, Mississippi comes in. The idea originated in Columbus, Georgia, but Mississippi did it first. Okay, so here's the poem. By the flow of the inland river, whence the fleets of iron have fled, where the blades of the grave grass quiver, asleep are the ranks of the dead. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, under the one, the blue, under the other, the gray. There in the robings of glory, those in the gloom of defeat, all with the battle blood gory in the dusk of eternity meet. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, under the laurel, the blue, under the willow, the gray. From the silence of sorrowful hours, the desolate monument or mourners go, lovingly laden with flowers, alike for the friend and the foe. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, under the roses, the blue, under the lilies, the gray. So with an equal splendor the morning sun rays fall, with a touch impartially tender on the blossoms blooming for all. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, broidered with gold, the blue, mellowed with gold, the gray. So when the summer calleth on forest and field of grain, with an equal murmur falleth the cooling drip of the rain. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, wet with the rain, the blue, wet with the rain, the gray. Sadly, but not with upbraiding, the generous deed was done. In the storm of the years that are fading, no braver battle was won. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, under the blossoms the blue, under the garlands the gray. No more shall the war cry sever, or the winding rivers be red. They banish our anger forever, when they laurel the graves of our dead. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, love and tears for the blue, tears and love for the gray. Remember our fallen. Remember the sacrifice that they have made so that we could be free. Pass it on to your children and grandchildren. This is Stab the Dragon, out here.